Wednesday. I am in an incredible mood because here at Leadership Untitled with Kareen Turner, we are celebrating a milestone. Welcome to episode 30. All right, welcome. As I just said, this is episode 30. And if there's one thing that I have learned along my career, my leadership journey, now in this season of my life as an entrepreneur, it is to celebrate all the milestones that you can. And this podcast has been a work of passion. It has been a meaningful work to me. There are weeks where the ideas are just flowing, and I've shared on previous podcasts. I have my little pink notebook where I'm just writing idea after idea. I have my podcast notebooks, and the words are just flowing. But then there are also weeks where the topics are harder to come by. The words, even when I have a topic, don't flow as easily. There are certainly times when doubt has entered into my consciousness. There are times when I feel as though I may be speaking into an abyss. And I want to say thank you because at each and every time, and I mean each and every time I've had those situations, someone, one of you, has reached out to share that this podcast is helping you, has helped you, that you found it insightful. And so I want to say thank you. Thank you to you for being here with this podcast, listening to the episodes, sending your words of support, sending your words of your experiences about how the podcast and the information that I share here, the strategies, my personal stories, has positively impacted you. So while I celebrate this milestone for me showing up and pushing through, I also could not celebrate it without each of you here. So thank you for your support of the Leadership Untitled podcast with me, Kareen Turner. And I encourage you to continue sharing these podcast episodes. I'm streaming live to LinkedIn and as well to YouTube. And so, for those of you who are joining on YouTube, the best way that you can support me is by subscribing and sharing. So, normally, this is when I introduce myself. And so, for those of you who have not yet guessed, I am Kareen Turner. I am a leadership expert. And as I go through and celebrate milestones, I also take an opportunity to revisit why this podcast exists. And I want to talk about the elephant in the room that my content has been relatively consistent. But wow, as I have gone through my notes, re listened to a few episodes, my intro has changed significantly from week to week almost. And as I was going through and revisiting those notes, I was actually okay with that. I identify as a high performer, and I know so many of you who listen identify as a high performer as well. And so, not having a plan and kind of navigating as you're going might seem like anathema to so many of us, but I am taking this opportunity to enjoy the journey. And I'm okay with the changes because I'm building my brand, finding my voice as I share my experiences and my passion for leadership, which is why the content has largely remained consistent, even while my introduction has changed. And as I prepared my notes for today's episode, I did look back at to see how my intro has changed. And it's been for sure a journey. And as I said, I'm okay with a switch up, but I'll be honest with you. And as a high performer, it's also hard to share areas of improvement publicly. And so here I am doing that. One of the areas that I'm not okay with as I looked at how my introduction has changed through these 30 episodes, 29 plus today, these 30 episodes. What I'm not okay with is that I feel like I've watered myself down. As I started off in episode 1, and I encourage you to go listen to episode 1 for the full details as to why I started the podcast. But when I look at that foundation that I set, the journey that I said we were all going to be on together, I recognize that, yeah, I've watered myself down. There's no other way to say it. There's no way around it to make it better. And for the TLDR, too long, didn't read it. You're not going to go back to episode 1. I'll share a little bit of why I started the podcast. And I did that to celebrate diverse female voices in the thought leadership space on leadership. This space is largely male and white. And I didn't see myself, still don't see myself represented in this community. And I will say there are strategies and advice that I have used to help me along my career. So it's not that the advice, it's not that the suggestions, it's not that their experiences that I wasn't able to draw from them, but perspective matters because as they share strategies, they share it from their perspective. As I share my experiences, my strategies, I'm sharing it from my perspective. And let me tell you, there are certainly things, tools, strategies that I have implemented, attempted to implement based on suggestions, widely held beliefs that come from a place of privilege that just don't hit the same when I, as a Black woman in corporate America, try to do the same thing. And so when I don't see myself represented and there isn't a voice that I can quickly say that I can turn to, that means that there is a lack in this space of diverse voices, specifically Black women in corporate. And that was where I started. I'll quote myself directly from episode 1. Leadership Untitled, this podcast unabashedly celebrates the insightful, influential, and resilient leadership that Black women and other women of color bring to the table. I love that. I still do. And it might sound weird because it's my quote, but it still resonates so deeply within me. So I know that my purpose and my mission for being here each and every week has not changed. I recognize, though, that there's a tension and there's a stigma whenever race enters into the conversation. There is a defensiveness that can happen. There is doubt as to how can your experience be that different? There is a questioning of, where are you really coming from? What have you contributed to make this situation the way it is? And that resistance and pushing against that resistance gets tiring. And I acknowledge that that is part of why I stepped back a little bit, watered down, as I said, my introduction, and why I find myself here, episode 30, celebrating, but also really recalibrating and being sure that I'm rooted in my initial mission. Because again, it still resonates deeply within me. And the need is still very much clearly still there. To be clear, to be absolutely clear, my content wouldn't have changed. I'm incredibly proud. I'm incredibly happy with what I have put into the world. What I would say is my heart and the reason for pushing it out there was not the same as in episode 1. And so again, I love the content that I've put out there, but I always wanna be sure that, again, it's anchored, it's rooted in my original goal and my original mission. And that's what I love about milestones. That's what I love about celebrating because you get a chance to dance, to be happy, to be in community, while also taking a moment to say, what are we going to do differently moving forward? So that's me. And you're probably thinking, thank you so much, Karen, for bringing us along on this journey with you, this insightful journey. But how does that apply to me? So let's talk about that. My first question to you is, when was the last time that you celebrated a milestone? When was the last time that you celebrated something that you accomplished? Especially as a leader. We go, 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 serve, 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 give, give, give. And we do incredible things. You do incredible things every single day. We just keep pushing. You just keep going. You just keep turning the page to that next fresh page to write a new to do list. So I'm asking you, when was the last time that you stopped and celebrated a milestone? Even if that's you acknowledging your own self, which is oftentimes the only acknowledgement that we need is from ourselves, is from within. And just as important, when was the last time that you celebrated a milestone with your team? And as I said, I'm rooted in my original purpose of celebrating the insightful, influential, and resilient leadership that Black women and other women of color bring to the table. And I absolutely believe that first, that celebration, that recognition has to come from within. But I'm also going to challenge you, my fellow Black women leaders and other women of color leaders, to take credit for the work that you are celebrating. Because I know there is just as much a stigma around race and entering race into a conversation, just as much as there is around you taking credit for the work that you're doing. So, when was the last time you celebrated a milestone? When was the last time you took credit for celebrating a milestone? And just as importantly, when is the last time that you celebrated with your team? And if I'm guessing correctly, you've probably celebrated with your team and given a lot of credit away and not celebrated yourself or taken credit for the work that you did to reach that project, to reach that goal, to reach that milestone. So take that credit, sis. Get it. After that, I want to ask you, when was the last time that you recalibrated, that you checked in with yourself, that you revisited your why? That's what we're talking about today. Why does the why matter? It's definitely a personal reflection for me, but I encourage it also to be what jumpstarts a personal reflection for you, personal and professional reflection for you. Because, yes, even from your corporate leadership perspective, I want to know that your why still matters, that you are aligned with your purpose, your integrity. Why are you doing the work that you're doing? Why are you working where you're working? Why are you in a leadership role? And I know as high performers, so many of us are also looking, so many of you are also looking to gain momentum in your careers. Why? Check in with yourself, revisit your why. As you think about where you're working, your organization, why do the mission, vision, and values speak to you? How do you live them while you're at work? And how do you demonstrate them so that your team members, your colleagues, other leaders see you living them at your workplace? And how does your organization live them as well? And as you consider your answers to these questions, I ask you this: when was the last time you shared those answers or a version of those answers with your team? And when was the last time you asked your team their why? It's important for us to not get caught up in the day to day. There's so much to check off every day, the work that just needs to get done to keep the business going. It's the mundane. It can be mundane. And when you're doing it every day after day, we can lose, all of us. Everyone is susceptible to losing momentum and losing motivation, or forgetting who the ultimate client customer is. When you get caught up in the day to day, you forget why you're doing the work that you're doing. Who are you serving? And we focus instead on the mundane, on getting the budget done at a certain time, on being sure that we've filled out these reports, on being sure that, whatever else it is that you can check off. But we focus on the mundane and not the bigger picture. And so I ask you again, what's your why, your mission, your vision, your values? How are you living them? How are you being an example to those around you? And then also sharing that with your team and asking them to share with you. And it's okay if some of your team members don't answer. It's okay if some of your team members, if you're rounding, say to you and are honest with you that they're there for a paycheck. I've had those. And honestly, I thank them for their trust that they could be honest with me, that they are there largely for a paycheck. And I respect that. I respect that they trusted me enough to share their truth with me, but also recognize that because they're motivated, that's their motivation. They're still showing up, they're still doing the work. But as a leader, I took it as a challenge to do my best to cast a greater vision for my team so that they could have something greater to latch onto outside of just the paycheck, because the paycheck one day may not be enough. And if you have someone who's just there for the paycheck, that one day may not be enough. So I always look at it as a challenge. I respect their response, and I look at it as a challenge from a leadership perspective. How can I have them latch onto a bigger picture? So today, my call to action is simple: revisit your why, share it with your team, round with your team and ask them their why. These are often intensely personal or can be intensely personal conversations, not necessarily a team meeting to ask each of your team members why. You can share in a meeting, and I highly encourage that so everyone can see and feel your emotion and your conviction, your character, see your integrity. But as you round with your team, asking them their why. And then I want you to share this process with your leader, the person who you report to. Let them know, as you're taking credit for a milestone, that you also took this opportunity to revisit your why and share what your why is, why you're there, why you're on a leadership journey. Because even leaders, and you know this, we all need to be inspired, to be motivated. And if you are the top dog, well, sis, way to go. I ask you then to set that vision, share your why with your board, with your team. There's always those around you who need to be motivated and inspired. And the ability to recast a vision on a regular basis and being able to be a catalyst for momentum will absolutely increase your influence. And that's what we're here for. So I welcome you to a refocused Leadership Untitled with Kareen Turner, where we celebrate diverse voices in leadership as we seek to build influence so that we can gain momentum in our leadership journeys. That you, I'll make it personal, that you can gain momentum in your leadership journey. So, as I close out this episode, my other call to action, of course, is to share it. Share it widely because, again, your ability to recast a vision, your ability to motivate and inspire, change direction, or make the direction even clearer is one of the number one ways to rebuild, to build influence. And it's not complicated. It just takes you time to revisit your why, put it into words, and share from your heart. I thank you all again for being here. Thank you for celebrating episode 30 with me. And thank you for being a member of the Leadership Untitled community. Have a good one.